Introduction, A Perfect Life, A Hidden Truth, 800+ words. Derek Carter believed in hard work, honesty, and the strength of family. A heavy equipment technician, he had spent years providing for his wife, Emily, and their 3 children, Sophia, 11, Jake, 8, and Lily, 7. Their life in Havenbrook, a quiet town in Oregon, was simple but fulfilling. They owned a modest home, shared laughter at the dinner table, and spent weekends exploring the outdoors. Emily had always been a loving wife, or so Derek thought. She was warm, attentive, and always seemed to be the glue that held the family together. She planned vacations, managed household responsibilities, and ensured their children had a childhood filled with love and care. But sometimes love can be a mask. And Derek was about to uncover a secret that would turn his entire world upside down. The start of a new life-altering discovery. For years, Derek had missed out on family getaways due to his demanding work schedule. His job often required long hours, and overtime shifts kept him from attending school events and family trips. Emily always understood, or at least she pretended to. When she and her sisters planned their annual 3-day getaway at Cedar Lake, Derek regretfully told her he wouldn't be able to make it. As usual, she seemed supportive. But then everything changed. A week before the trip, Derek's boss gave him unexpected time off. It was rare, almost unheard of, but for once he could actually join his family. He rushed home, excited to share the news. But when he told Emily, instead of joy, he saw hesitation flash across her face. "That's great, Derek," she said, forcing a smile. For the first time in their marriage, Derek felt a strange instinctual doubt. A feeling that something wasn't right. At first, he ignored it, convincing himself that Emily was just surprised. But that night, he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. A deleted email. A name he didn't recognize. And a plan that didn't include him. Derek was never the jealous type. He trusted Emily. But trust is dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. And before the trip was over, Derek would uncover a betrayal so deep that his life would never be the same again. Chapter 1, An Unexpected Change of Plans, 1,500+ words. Derek Carter was the kind of man who believed in simple pleasures. A cold beer after a long shift. The sound of his children laughing in the backyard. The warmth of his wife's touch as they sat on the couch after dinner. He worked hard, often putting in extra hours at Millard & Sons heavy equipment repairs to provide for his family. The job was exhausting, but the thought of coming home to his wife Emily and their 3 kids made it worth it. Yet, for all the effort he put into his marriage, something had been off lately. Emily had grown distant, not in an obvious way, but in the subtle details that only a husband paying close attention would notice. She no longer reached for his hand when they walked together. Her kisses felt routine, not warm. And when he looked at her, there was something behind her eyes, a quiet distraction that he couldn't quite place. But Derek wasn't the type to dwell on these things. He had faith in their marriage. At least, he did until the night before their annual family trip. A rare opportunity. It had been a long day at work when Derek's supervisor, Frank, pulled him aside. "Carter," Frank said, rubbing his jaw. "You've been pulling extra shifts for months. Take the rest of the week off. Paid." Derek blinked. "You serious?" Frank chuckled. "Yeah. Go spend some time with your family before your wife forgets what you look like." Derek laughed, but deep down, excitement swelled in his chest. He had missed too many family trips. Now, for the first time in years, he could join them. He practically rushed home, eager to tell Emily. But when he walked through the front door, he wasn't met with the usual warm greeting. Emily was at the kitchen counter, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, and for a split second, before she could control her expression, Derek saw it. A flicker of something. Was it panic? Then it was gone, replaced by a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, honey," she said, setting her phone down. "You're home early." Derek grinned. "Got some news." He pulled her into a hug, but she was too stiff. "What is it?" she asked. "Frank gave me the rest of the week off," Derek said proudly. "Which means I can finally come with you guys to Cedar Lake." Emily hesitated. It was subtle, but Derek caught it. "That's great, babe," she said. "The kids will love having you there." Her words were right. Her tone wasn't. Derek frowned. "You don't seem happy." Emily quickly shook her head. No, I am. It's just. I wasn't expecting it, that's all. Derek wanted to believe her. So he pushed the doubt aside. But that doubt? It was about to grow into something he couldn't ignore. A tiny mistake that changed everything. Later that night, Derek went into their home office to grab his old camping gear from the closet. Emily was at her laptop, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. When she noticed him, she flinched just barely and quickly closed the screen. Derek arched a brow. Something wrong? Emily forced a chuckle. Oh no. Just checking some emails before bed. Derek said nothing. But after she left the room, curiosity got the best of him. He opened her laptop. The inbox was empty. The sent folder? Also empty. But the deleted folder? There was one email. Derek's stomach tightened as he clicked it open. The message that changed everything. From Emily Carter. To unknown. Subject, change of plans. Derek is coming to Cedar Lake. We need to be careful. I'll keep him occupied so we still have time together. Derek's hands clenched into fists. The words were there. Clear as day. And suddenly the past few months made perfect sense. Emily wasn't just distant. She was hiding something. Something that he was about to uncover. Something that would change everything. Chapter 2, A Subtle Clue. Derek stared at the glowing laptop screen, the words burned into his mind. Derek is coming to Cedar Lake. We need to be careful. I'll keep him occupied so we still have time together. His hands tightened into fists. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to calm down, to think logically. Maybe there was a simple explanation, maybe she was talking about meeting an old friend or something completely innocent. But deep down, in the pit of his stomach, he knew. This wasn't innocent. This was a betrayal in progress. The beginning of suspicion. Derek shut the laptop carefully, his heart pounding. He needed to approach this smartly. If Emily was really hiding something, she was already careful, meaning if he confronted her now, she would just lie. He had to wait. Gather more proof. Watch her closely. He took a deep breath and walked into the bedroom, forcing his expression into something neutral. Emily was already lying in bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up. Everything okay? Derek nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah. Just excited about the trip. Emily smiled back. Me too. A lie. And now Derek knew it. The departure to Cedar Lake. The next morning, Derek woke up before dawn, but Emily was already up, moving around the kitchen. She had packed their suitcases neatly by the door. The kids were still asleep, unaware of the tension hanging in the air. Derek walked into the kitchen and poured himself coffee. Emily turned, giving him another one of those fake smiles. You ready? She asked casually. Derek took a sip of coffee, watching her carefully. Yeah. Can't wait to spend some time together. Emily nodded, but her fingers tapped against the countertop, a nervous habit. She was on edge. The drive to Cedar Lake was about 3 hours. The kids sat in the back seat, excitedly talking about all the activities they would do. Derek drove while Emily sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone. He noticed something. She kept turning her screen slightly away from him. She never used to do that. Derek kept his eyes on the road but casually asked, Who are you texting? Emily flinched just for a second. Oh, just Karen, she said quickly, referring to her sister. She's making sure we have enough food at the cabins. Another lie. Derek knew better than to push her now. But his gut told him she wasn't texting Karen. And whoever it was, she didn't want him to see it. A secret cabin. By the time they arrived at Cedar Lake, the sun was shining and the air smelled of pine and fresh water. The cabins were tucked away near the shore, surrounded by trees. Derek parked the car and the kids immediately jumped out, racing toward the lake with excitement. Emily smiled at them, but when she thought Derek wasn't looking, her eyes flickered to the farthest cabin on the lot. Derek followed her gaze. There, parked outside a cabin at the very edge of the property, was a black SUV. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. That wasn't Karen's car. Derek turned to Emily. Whose cabin is that? Emily blinked, like she had been caught off guard. Oh, I think that belongs to one of the rental guests. Probably nothing. Probably nothing. But Derek knew better. He forced a smile and grabbed the bags from the car. Let's get settled in. The small signs that said everything. As the day passed, Derek continued watching. Emily was careful, too careful. She kept her phone close, slipping away whenever she had an excuse. She spent too much time checking her messages, and Derek caught her glancing toward that far cabin more than once. At one point, he saw her sister Karen and whispered, "Hey, have you met the people in that cabin?" Karen shrugged. "Nope, why?" Derek exhaled slowly. "Just curious." Karen didn't seem to notice anything unusual, which meant Emily hadn't told her sister what was going on. That only made Derek more suspicious. This wasn't just some innocent getaway. Emily was planning something, and Derek was about to find out exactly what. The first mistake. That evening, as the kids played near the fire pit, Derek walked into the cabin pretending to grab something from his bag. Emily was inside, standing near the window texting. She didn't hear him come in. Derek cleared his throat. "Hey!" Emily nearly jumped out of her skin. She quickly locked her phone and turned around. "Oh! Hey, I was just checking the weather." Another lie. Derek tilted his head. "Why'd you lock your phone so fast?" Emily blinked. "What?" Derek shrugged. "Looked like you didn't want me to see something." Emily laughed nervously. "Derek, don't be ridiculous." But he wasn't being ridiculous. She was hiding something, and it was only a matter of time before she slipped up. The moment of truth. Later that night, Derek pretended to go to bed early, letting Emily believe he was asleep. Then, around midnight, he quietly got up. Emily's side of the bed was empty. Derek's pulse quickened. He moved to the window, his heart pounding, and there she was. Emily was slipping out of the cabin, phone in hand, walking toward the farthest cabin at the edge of the property. Derek didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket, slipped outside, and followed her. The shadows covered him as he moved between the trees, staying low, careful not to make a sound. Emily didn't know he was watching, and as he saw her reach the cabin door, his worst fear was confirmed. Because standing there, waiting for her, was another man. Derek's stomach dropped. She smiled at him, and then she kissed him. A slow, familiar kiss. Derek clenched his fists, his entire body numb. There it was. The proof. Everything he had ignored, every small sign, it was all true. Emily had been lying to him for years. And now? She had no idea that Derek knew everything. Chapter 3: The Digital Trail. Derek stood frozen in the shadows, watching his wife kiss another man. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat hammering in his ears like a war drum. There was no more doubt. No more excuses. No more wondering if he was just being paranoid. Emily was cheating on him. Right now. Right in front of him. And she had no idea he was watching. Derek forced himself to breathe. He had imagined a lot of things since finding that email, but seeing it with his own eyes? That was something else entirely. His fingers clenched into fists. His muscles tensed. A part of him wanted to storm over, rip that guy away from his wife, and demand answers. But another part, the rational part, held him back. This wasn't just about catching them in the act. This was about proving it beyond a doubt. Because once he confronted Emily, she would lie. She would deny. And Derek needed evidence she couldn't escape from. The walk back to the cabin. Derek turned and walked away, his body running on pure adrenaline. By the time he reached his cabin, his hands were trembling. He forced himself to sit down, gripping the table, breathing deeply. Calm down. Think. Plan. If Emily had been careful enough to cover her tracks for this long, she wasn't going to just confess. And if he accused her now, she would twist it, make him look like the paranoid, controlling husband. But there was one thing he was sure of. People always leave digital footprints. And that's exactly where he was going to start. Unlocking the truth. Emily's phone was the key. Derek needed access to it, but she had been keeping it glued to her hand the entire trip. The only time she didn't have it? When she was asleep. So Derek waited. When Emily finally returned to their cabin, she slipped into bed quietly, thinking he was still asleep. Derek didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even let his breathing change. He just waited. And when she finally drifted off, her phone resting on the nightstand, Derek reached over and took it, cracking the code. The phone was locked. Derek stared at the screen, his heart racing. Emily had changed her passcode recently, probably to keep him from finding out the truth. But he knew her. She wasn't creative with passwords. She used things that were easy to remember. So he started guessing. Their anniversary? No. Her birthday? No. The kids' birthdays? No. Derek clenched his jaw. Come on. Then he tried something different. The name of their first pet. Bingo. The screen unlocked. And Derek's stomach turned as he prepared to dive into the ugly truth. The digital evidence. The first place he checked was her messages. He scrolled through her recent conversations looking for anything suspicious. And there it was. Nathan Harper. Derek had never heard the name before, but judging by the dozens of texts between them, this was the guy from the cabin. He tapped on the conversation, his breath catching in his throat. Emily, can't wait to see you tonight. Same spot? Nathan, yeah. I'll be waiting. Emily, Derek has no idea. I feel a little bad, but we deserve this. Nathan, he's never suspected anything? Emily, not at all. He's too busy with work. He barely notices me anymore. Derek's hands shook. Barely notices her? He had been working himself to the bone to give her a good life. He had sacrificed so much for their family, and she was using it as an excuse to betray him? His vision blurred as he continued reading. The texts went back months. Emily and Nathan had been sneaking around for at least a year. Vacations. Hotel stays. Even while Derek was at work, Emily had found ways to meet up with him. This wasn't just an affair. It was a second life. And Derek had been nothing more than a convenience. A provider. A backup plan. The final proof. Derek needed more. He went to her photos. And what he found shattered him. Dozens of pictures. Some of them at fancy restaurants, some at the beach, all with Nathan. Pictures of them together, smiling, laughing. Happy. Pictures of Emily wearing the dress he had bought her for their anniversary, but she had never worn it for him. Derek felt sick. The woman in these pictures? He didn't recognize her. She looked carefree. Alive. Like a woman who hadn't just spent the past 12 years building a life with him. Like a woman who had already moved on long before he ever knew something was wrong. What now? Derek set the phone down carefully, his breathing shallow. The proof was there. The undeniable truth. So what now? Did he confront her? Did he let her wake up to the cold realization that he knew everything? No. That wasn't enough. Emily had planned this for months, maybe years. And now? Derek was going to make sure she lost everything. The next step. Derek copied everything. The texts. The photos. The messages. He backed them up onto a flash drive, then onto his own phone. Then he put Emily's phone back exactly where it was. Because she still didn't know he knew. And that was his greatest advantage. Derek laid back down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Emily would wake up thinking everything was normal. She would smile at him, kiss him, pretend nothing was wrong. And she would have no idea that it was the last morning she would ever wake up as Derek Carter's wife. Chapter 4, A Trip Full of Secrets. Derek woke up before sunrise, his mind racing with everything he had discovered the night before. The truth sat in his chest like a heavy weight, pressing against his ribs with every breath. Emily was cheating. She had been lying to him for over a year. And the worst part? She had no idea that he knew. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Derek realized something. This trip wasn't just a vacation anymore. It was a test. A chance to see how far Emily would go, to see how deep her deception really ran. And if she thought she was going to get away with it, she was in for a rude awakening. Breakfast with a liar. Derek rolled out of bed and walked into the small kitchen of the cabin. Emily was already up, brewing coffee like it was just another normal morning. She smiled at him. Good morning, babe. Derek forced himself to smile back. Morning. Emily slid a mug across the counter toward him, her eyes soft. Did you sleep okay? Derek took a slow sip of his coffee, watching her. She looked so calm. So at ease. Like she wasn't hiding a dirty secret. Like she hadn't snuck out in the middle of the night to meet another man. Derek swallowed down the bitterness rising in his throat. Yeah. Slept fine. Emily nodded, turning back to the stove where she was flipping pancakes. A perfect wife. A perfect mother. A perfect liar. Derek sat down at the table, pretending to check his phone while watching her every move. And then he saw it. The way she glanced at her phone screen. The way her fingers hesitated like she was waiting for something. A message. A signal. From him. Derek clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He couldn't blow his cover. Not yet. The excuse to get away. As breakfast wrapped up, Emily wiped her hands on a towel and turned to him. I was thinking of taking a little hike later, she said casually. Derek raised an eyebrow. A hike? Emily smiled. Yeah. Just to get some fresh air, maybe take some pictures for the scrapbook. Lies. She never went on solo hikes. And she had never cared about taking pictures for a scrapbook. Derek played along. Sounds nice. Want me to come with you? Emily hesitated. Barely half a second. Then she laughed lightly. I was actually thinking of going alone just for a little bit. Clear my head, you know? Derek nodded slowly. Of course. But inside? Inside, he was already 10 steps ahead of her. Following the trail of lies. An hour later, Emily grabbed her backpack and kissed him on the cheek. I won't be gone too long, she said sweetly. Derek smiled. Take your time. He watched from the cabin window as she disappeared down the trail. The moment she was out of sight, Derek moved fast. He grabbed his jacket, stuffed his phone into his pocket, and followed her. Staying low, keeping a good distance, he moved through the trees without making a sound. Emily walked for about 10 minutes before stopping in a clearing. And then, like clockwork, a dark figure stepped out from behind the trees. Nathan. Derek's blood boiled as he watched his wife rush into another man's arms. Nathan grinned, pulling her close, touching her like she belonged to him. Derek clenched his fists. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to march out there and end this right now. But no. Not yet. He needed more. He needed proof she couldn't deny. So he pulled out his phone and started recording. The betrayal caught on camera. Derek kept the camera steady, zooming in just enough to capture their faces. Emily was smiling, laughing, completely comfortable in the arms of another man. Nathan leaned down and whispered something into her ear. She giggled and swatted his chest playfully. She had never laughed like that with Derek. Not in years. Derek swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his phone. Then, the moment that sealed it, Nathan cupped her face and kissed her. A deep, slow kiss. A kiss full of history. A kiss that said this wasn't new. This was routine. Derek's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to keep recording. He needed this. Because when this was over, Emily was going to face the consequences of her choices. And Derek would make sure she lost everything. The plan begins. Derek had seen enough. He slipped away, heading back to the cabin before Emily could suspect anything. By the time she returned, her cheeks were flushed and she had that same fake smile plastered on her face. Hey, she said, kicking off her hiking boots. You guys do anything fun while I was gone? Derek shrugged. Just relaxed. You. Emily stretched, pretending to be tired. Yeah, it was nice. Just needed some time to myself. Derek nodded, playing his part perfectly. Glad you got a break. Emily smiled, walking into the bathroom. The moment the door closed, Derek exhaled and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through the videos and photos he had taken. Proof. Undeniable, solid proof. And now? It was time to set things in motion. Because by the time this trip was over, Emily was going to know exactly what it felt like to lose everything. And Derek? Derek was going to walk away a free man. Chapter 5. A shocking discovery. Derek sat alone on the cabin's wooden porch, staring out at the darkening sky. His phone rested in his palm, the screen still showing the videos and photos he had captured that afternoon. Emily laughing. Emily kissing another man. Emily looking happier in that moment than she had in their marriage for the past 5 years. Derek clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was premeditated. She had planned this down to the last detail, right under his nose. And now she had no idea that he knew. Derek took a slow breath, forcing himself to focus. Rage wasn't going to help him. If he was going to walk away from this with his dignity intact, he needed to think carefully. Because when he confronted Emily, it wasn't just going to be about catching her. It was going to be about taking back control. private conversation. The kids were playing inside, their laughter filtering through the open window. Emily sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, acting like the perfect wife and mother. Derek stepped inside and leaned against the wall. "Hey, Em." She looked up, smiling. "Yeah." Derek took a slow breath, keeping his expression unreadable. "You know," he said casually, "I was thinking of taking a little solo walk tomorrow morning, just to clear my head." Emily blinked. That tiny hesitation. She wasn't expecting that. "Oh," she said quickly. "That's nice. You should. The trails are beautiful this time of year." Derek nodded, pretending to check his phone. He wasn't actually planning to go anywhere. This was a trap, because if Emily thought he'd be gone, she would think she had another opportunity. And that was exactly what Derek needed. A suspicious late-night call. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Derek stayed up, pretending to read on his phone. Emily was in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. Then her phone buzzed. Derek glanced over. It was face down on the table, but the screen briefly lit up. "Nathan." Derek's pulse spiked. Emily stepped out of the bathroom a few moments later and casually picked up her phone. She glanced at the screen, her expression completely unreadable. Then, just as quickly, she turned away and typed something back. Derek said nothing. He just watched and waited, because whatever she had just sent, he was going to find out. The truth hidden in her phone. Emily fell asleep quickly that night, her breathing soft and steady. Derek stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. This was his chance. He slowly reached over, his fingers brushing against Emily's phone on the nightstand. It was locked, but Derek already knew the passcode, their first pet's name. He unlocked it on the first try. His heart pounded as he navigated to her messages. And what he found made his blood run cold. The messages that changed everything. "Nathan, are we still good for tomorrow?" Emily, "Yeah. He's going on a hike. We'll have time." Nathan, "I miss you." Emily, "Me too." Derek swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the phone. They were already planning their next meeting, right under his nose. But that wasn't the worst part. Derek scrolled further back, his chest tightening with every line of text. "Nathan, can't wait to have you all to myself soon." Emily, "Just a little longer. Once everything is settled, we'll be free." Derek's breath hitched. What the hell did that mean? His pulse pounded in his ears as he scrolled further. Then, he saw it. "Nathan. Does he suspect anything?" Emily, "Not at all. He still thinks I love him. Once the divorce is done, he won't even know what hit him." Derek felt like the air had been punched out of his lungs. Divorce? She was already planning to leave him? Before he even found out about the affair? He clenched his jaw, his hands shaking. This wasn't just cheating. This was an entire setup. Emily had no intention of staying with him. She was waiting for the right moment to leave, after she had drained him of everything. His money, his time, his trust. And once she had it all, she was going to walk away like he had never mattered. A sudden realization. Derek sat back, forcing himself to breathe. His entire life had been a lie. Emily had spent years pretending to love him, all while planning to leave him for someone else. And he had never seen it coming. But now he knew everything. And Emily? She had no idea that her plan had already failed. The turning point. Derek put the phone back exactly where he found it and laid back down. He didn't sleep. His mind raced through the possibilities. If Emily wanted a clean exit, she wasn't going to get one. She wanted to take everything from him? Not a chance. Derek had a new plan now. He wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. She was going to learn the hard way that betrayal came with a price. And tomorrow everything was going to change. Chapter 6, Facing the Truth. Derek lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the weight of Emily's betrayal pressed down on his chest. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just lies. She had planned this. For months, maybe even years. She had smiled in his face, kissed him goodnight, shared a home and a family with him, all while secretly preparing to leave. To leave him for another man. And she had thought she could get away with it. Derek clenched his fists beneath the blanket. But now? Now he was the one in control. And Emily had no idea what was coming. A normal morning for now. By the time the sun rose, Derek had made his decision. This wasn't just about confronting Emily. It was about taking back his life. When Emily finally stirred beside him, she stretched and gave him one of those fake, sweet smiles. "Morning, babe," she murmured, reaching for her phone. Derek forced himself to smile back. "Morning." She had no idea that he had spent the night reading through her messages, going through her lies. She had no clue that he knew everything. And that was Derek's biggest advantage. Emily sat up, scrolling through her texts, probably checking to see if Nathan had messaged her again. Derek sipped his coffee, watching her carefully. "So," he said casually, "you still planning on going for another hike today?" Emily froze just for a second. Then she laughed lightly. "Oh, yeah. Probably just a short one." "Lies." Derek nodded, setting his coffee cup down. "Well, have fun," he said smoothly. "I'll just stay here with the kids." Emily's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks," she murmured. Then she kissed him on the cheek, acting as if she weren't sneaking off to see another man. Derek clenched his jaw. "Enjoy your last day of lying, Emily. Because after today, everything changes." Tracking her moves, Emily left for her hike just after breakfast. Derek waited 5 minutes, then grabbed his phone and followed. He stayed low, moving between the trees, keeping a safe distance as she made her way through the wooded trail. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his breathing steady. This time, he wasn't going to just watch. This time, he was going to catch them. Emily didn't even look behind her. She wasn't worried. She thought she had everything under control. She had no idea that Derek was just a few steps behind, listening, watching, recording. And when she finally reached the small clearing, Derek saw him. Nathan Harper. Waiting for her. Catching the lies in action. Nathan smiled as Emily approached. She threw her arms around him. Derek gritted his teeth, tightening his grip on his phone as he continued recording everything. "Emily, I've missed you." "Nathan, you just saw me last night." Emily, laughing, "I know, but I hate pretending with Derek. I just want to be with you." "Nathan, soon, babe. Once you leave him, we'll be together for real." Derek stiffened. So this was it. They weren't just sneaking around. They were plotting his entire life away. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was using him until she was ready to leave. Until she had taken everything. And Nathan? Nathan thought he had already won. Derek clenched his jaw. Not today. Time to end the game. Derek didn't hesitate. He stepped out of the shadows, walking straight into the clearing. Emily's back was to him, but Nathan saw him first, his face draining of color. Emily noticed his reaction and turned. When she saw Derek standing there, phone in hand, her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in this entire trip, she looked truly afraid. Derek," she stammered, stepping back. Derek held up his phone. "Say hello to the camera, sweetheart." Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Nathan, to his credit, didn't try to run. He just stared, completely silent. Derek tilted his head. "Go on. Don't stop on my account. You were just talking about how much you hate pretending with me, right?" Emily whimpered. I can explain." Derek laughed, cold and sharp. "Oh, I'd love to hear it." Emily's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. But there was none. Not this time. A different kind of ending. Derek let the silence stretch between them, watching as Emily crumbled. For the first time, she wasn't in control. She wasn't the one pulling the strings. And Derek? He was done playing the fool. "I know everything, Emily," he said, his voice steady. "I know about the messages, the meetings, the plans to leave me once you got what you wanted." Emily flinched. Nathan looked away. Derek shook his head. "You should have been honest," he continued. I would have respected you more if you just told me the truth. But instead, you played me for a fool. Emily started crying. Derek, please. No. His voice was sharp, cutting her off instantly. I don't want your excuses, he said. I don't want your lies. I want you to listen because this is the last conversation we'll ever have. Emily's breath hitched. Derek stared directly at Nathan. You can have her, he said simply. Nathan blinked. What? Derek smirked. You heard me. She's all yours. I hope you enjoy every second of wondering when she's going to cheat on you two. Nathan's face darkened. Emily sobbed harder. Derek just turned and walked away. Because in the end, Emily didn't deserve a dramatic fight. She didn't deserve his anger, his sadness, or his pain. She only deserved to be left behind. And Derek? He was finally free. The final goodbye. Derek packed his bags that afternoon. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't even look at Emily. He just walked away, taking his kids and his dignity with him. Emily had thought she was winning. But in the end, she had lost everything. And Derek? Derek had finally won. Because for the first time in years, he was truly free. Chapter 7. A Life Built on Lies. Derek drove in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel as the road stretched ahead of him. The car was quiet except for the occasional rustling from the back seat, where Sophia, Jake, and Lily sat. They had no idea what had just happened. No idea that their mother's betrayal had just torn their family apart. Derek's chest tightened. How the hell was he going to explain this to them? How do you tell your kids that the life they thought was real was nothing but a carefully built lie? He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to focus. Right now, his only priority was getting them away from Emily, away from the betrayal, and toward something new, something better, something that didn't include a woman who had never really loved him. A temporary escape. Derek pulled into the driveway of his parents' house in Willow Creek, about an hour away from Cedar Lake. His mother, Janice, stepped onto the porch the moment she heard his car pull up. Her brows furrowed as she took in the scene. Derek's stiff posture, the kids looking confused and quiet. Something was wrong, and she knew it. Janice walked down the steps, her eyes full of concern. Derek. Derek forced a tight smile. Mom, can we stay here for a while? Janice didn't hesitate. Of course, honey. She didn't ask questions. Not yet, because Janice Carter was a mother first, and she could tell, just by looking at her son, that he had just been shattered. The conversation he didn't want to have. That night, after getting the kids settled, Derek sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. His father, Ron Carter, sat across from him, watching him carefully. Finally, Ron sighed. You gonna tell us what happened? Derek swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he told them everything. The emails, the secret meetings, the plans for divorce, plans Emily had made before he even knew she was cheating. Janice covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes welling with tears. Ron shook his head, his jaw tight. That woman, he exhaled sharply. I never trusted her. Derek let out a bitter chuckle. Well, you were right. Janice sniffled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Derek nodded, but the words felt hollow. Sorry wouldn't fix this. Sorry wouldn't undo 12 years of lies. Emily's call. His phone buzzed. Emily. Derek stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Janice frowned. You don't have to talk to her. But Derek knew he did. Not for himself. For the kids. He sighed and stood, walking onto the porch before answering. What? His voice was flat, emotionless. Emily sounded wrecked. Derek, she sobbed. Where are you? Where did you take the kids? Derek scoffed. Like you care. I do care, she insisted. They're my children too. Derek's fingers clenched around the phone. Yeah? Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to throw your whole damn family away. Emily whimpered. I made a mistake. Derek laughed coldly. A mistake? He shook his head. No, Emily. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. Leaving the stove on is a mistake. What you did, that was a choice. Emily sobbed harder. But Derek felt nothing. Because for years he had been the one left hurting. And now she was finally the one suffering. The truth she never expected. You didn't just cheat on me, Derek continued. You built an entire life of lies. You made plans behind my back. You were going to leave me once you got everything you wanted. Emily let out a shaky breath. That's not true. I saw the texts. Derek cut in. The messages. The photos. Silence. Emily stopped breathing for a second. Because she knew. She knew she had been caught. Derek shook his head. And the worst part? You weren't even going to tell me. You were just going to let me keep loving you while you planned your escape. Emily whimpered. Derek, I never meant to hurt you. Derek's jaw clenched. Then why did you? Emily had no answer. Because there wasn't one. She had done what she did because she wanted to. Because she was selfish. Because she had never really loved him. Not like he had loved her. Not like he had trusted her. Final goodbye. Derek exhaled. This is what's going to happen, he said calmly. You're going to stay away from me. You're going to stay away from my family. And when we talk, it will only be about the kids. Emily sniffled. Derek, please. No, his voice was sharp. Cold. You made your bed, Emily. Now you get to lie in it. Silence. Emily's breath hitched. And then, in the quietest voice, she whispered, I still love you. Derek closed his eyes. Then he laughed. Then you should have tried harder. And with that, he hung up. For the last time. Moving forward. The next morning, Derek woke up feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. Emily was gone from his life. The lies were over. The betrayal was in the past. And now he had a chance to build something real. Something that wasn't built on deception. Something that wasn't a lie. Derek smiled softly as he watched his kids playing in the backyard. For the first time in years, he was free. And this time, he wasn't looking back. Chapter 8: The Final Confrontation. Derek sat at the kitchen table in his parents' house, staring at the divorce papers spread out in front of him. It had been a week since he walked away from Emily at Cedar Lake. A week since he had taken his kids and left her behind. And in that time, she had called and texted nonstop. She begged. She pleaded. She even tried sending old pictures of their family memories meant to manipulate him into forgiving her. But Derek wasn't the same man he had been before. Emily had destroyed the life they built together. And now? Now he was going to make sure she never had the chance to hurt him again. A call that couldn't be avoided. His phone rang. Again. Derek sighed when he saw Emily's name on the screen. This time, though, he answered. What? His voice was flat, emotionless. Emily hesitated. Derek, please, we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about. Emily's breath hitched. The kids, they need me. Derek's jaw clenched. Funny how you care about them now. Emily whimpered. I always cared. Derek scoffed. You cared about yourself. You cared about Nathan. But our family? You threw that away. Silence. Then Emily whispered, can we at least meet in person? Derek exhaled slowly. This was it. The final confrontation. The last time he would ever see the woman he had once loved. Fine, he said. Tomorrow. Noon. The park near your sister's house. Emily let out a relieved breath. Thank you. Derek didn't respond. He just hung up. The final face-to-face. The next day, Derek stood in Riverbend Park, watching as Emily pulled up in her car. She stepped out hesitantly, her eyes searching his face for any sign of forgiveness. She wouldn't find it. Emily looked rough. Her makeup was minimal, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She had dark circles under her eyes as if she hadn't slept in days. Good. Because neither had he. Derek, she said softly. He crossed his arms. Talk. Emily's lip trembled. I don't know where to start. Derek let out a bitter chuckle. I'm sorry I destroyed our family. Emily swallowed hard. I am sorry. Derek tilted his head. Are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because you got caught? Emily's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time, Derek didn't care. He had spent too many nights crying over her. He had spent too many days wondering what he did wrong. But now? Now he knew the truth. Emily had betrayed him because she wanted to. Not because he was a bad husband. Not because he wasn't enough. But because she was selfish. And no amount of tears would ever change that. The excuses begin. Emily sniffled. Derek, please. I never wanted things to end like this. Derek arched an eyebrow. That's funny, considering you were already planning to leave me. Emily flinched. I was confused. Derek laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Confused? He shook his head. Emily, you don't accidentally cheat for over a year. You don't accidentally plan a divorce behind your husband's back. Emily wiped her eyes. I was scared, okay? I was scared of hurting you. Derek's fists clenched. So instead, you lied. You slept with another man. You let me believe we had a future while you were planning to throw it all away. Emily had no answer. Because deep down, she knew he was right. Her last attempt at manipulation. Emily took a shaky breath. Derek, I still love you. Derek went completely still. Then, slowly, he smirked. You don't love me, Emily. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Yes, I do. No, Derek interrupted. You love what I gave you. Stability. A home. A life without struggle. But me? You threw me away the second you found someone new. Emily's face crumpled. That's not true. Derek's expression hardened. Then why did you choose him? Silence. Emily looked away. Because she had no defense. She had chosen Nathan over him. She had chosen excitement over loyalty. And now she had lost everything. The divorce papers. Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He held it out. Emily blinked. What's this? Derek's voice was calm. Too calm. Our divorce papers. Emily's eyes widened. Derek. I'm done, he said simply. This is the last thing I'll ever ask from you. Sign them. And we go our separate ways. Emily looked devastated. You don't mean that. Derek arched an eyebrow. You think I'd take you back? Emily swallowed. I don't know. Derek shook his head. Emily, you don't get to not know anymore. You made your choices. You chose them. He exhaled sharply. And now you get to live with that. Emily stared at the papers, her hands shaking. Derek watched as reality finally sank in. She had ruined everything. And there was no fixing it. A final goodbye. Emily looked up, fresh tears streaming down her face. Derek, she whispered. I wish I could take it all back. Derek studied her for a long moment. Then finally he smiled. I don't. Emily's breath hitched. Because Derek wasn't just walking away. He was letting her go. For good. Emily wiped at her face. Will we ever? No. Derek's voice was firm. This is it, Emily. Emily swallowed hard. And then, for the first time in their entire relationship, she was the one watching him walk away. She was the one left behind. And Derek? Derek was finally free. Moving forward. The next morning, Derek stood in his lawyer's office as he finalized the paperwork. The marriage was over. The lies were done. And for the first time in years, Derek felt at peace. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't sad. He was just ready to move on. Because in the end, Emily had lost. Not because she was alone, but because she had let go of a man who would have done anything for her. And now? She had to live with that for the rest of her life. Derek stepped outside, feeling the sun on his face. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Because his future? His future was finally his own. And it was going to be better than ever. Chapter 9, Breaking Free. Derek stepped out of his lawyer's office, the divorce papers finalized. It was over. 12 years of marriage gone. 12 years of love, trust, and loyalty shattered. But as he stood on the sunlit sidewalk, inhaling the crisp autumn air, he felt something he never expected to feel. Relief. No more lies. No more wondering if the woman he loved was sneaking around behind his back. No more wasting his time on someone who never truly valued him. For the first time in years, Derek Carter was free. And he wasn't going to waste another second looking back. A fresh start for the kids. Derek's biggest concern was still the children. Sophia, Jake, and Lily were his world, and no matter what happened between him and Emily, they deserved stability. That afternoon, he met with his parents at a small diner in Willow Creek where he had been staying since leaving Cedar Lake. Janice poured him a cup of coffee, her warm eyes filled with concern. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" Derek shrugged. "Better than I expected." Ron, his father, grunted. "Good. Because that woman doesn't deserve another thought." Derek smirked. "Don't worry. She won't be getting one." But then his expression sobered. "The kids? I don't know how much they understand." Janice sighed. "Have they asked about their mother?" Derek nodded. "Sophia did. She's old enough to know something's wrong." His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Just be honest with them. They deserve the truth." Derek exhaled. "Yeah, but how much truth?" Ron set his coffee down with a thud. "Enough to let them know their dad isn't the bad guy." Derek smiled at that. Because no matter what Emily had planned, she wouldn't win. She had already lost the one thing that mattered most. Emily tries to crawl back. Later that night, as Derek sat on his parents' back porch, his phone buzzed. "Emily." Again. He ignored it. A minute later, a text came through. "Emily, please, Derek. Just talk to me." Derek sighed. She still didn't get it. He wasn't hers to manipulate anymore. But curiosity got the best of him. He opened the message thread and scrolled up. There were dozens of unread texts from her over the past few days. "Emily, I made a mistake." "Emily, please let's fix this." "Emily, I still love you." "Emily, can't we talk?" "Emily, the kids need us both." Derek scoffed. She was only saying this now because she had lost everything. If he had never caught her, she would have gone through with her plan. She would have left him for Nathan. She would have taken everything she could. And now that it had all fallen apart, now she wanted him back. Derek exhaled sharply, then typed a simple reply. "Derek, there's nothing to fix." A minute later, Emily called. This time, Derek answered. Not because he wanted to hear her voice, but because he wanted to make sure she finally understood. The last conversation. Emily's voice was shaky when she spoke. "Derek, please? I just need a chance to explain." Derek's jaw tightened. "You've already explained enough." Emily sniffled. "I wasn't thinking straight. I got caught up in something I shouldn't have." Derek laughed coldly. "That's funny because according to your messages, you were thinking pretty damn clearly when you planned to leave me." Silence. Then, softly, "I never wanted to hurt you." Derek exhaled slowly. "Then why did you?" Emily let out a small, broken sound. "I don't know." Derek shook his head. "Yeah, you do. You just don't want to admit it." Emily whimpered. "I still love you." Derek closed his eyes. Once, those words would have meant everything. "Yeah?" They meant nothing. "No, Emily," he said calmly. "You loved having me. You loved the stability I gave you. You loved knowing I'd always be there, no matter what." He let out a breath. "But you didn't love me." Emily sobbed. Derek felt nothing. Because this wasn't his pain to carry anymore. It was hers. And she would have to live with it. Walking away for good. "Goodbye, Emily," Derek said. Emily gasped. "Derek, please, don't do this." But he already had. He ended the call. Blocked her number. And with one final press of a button, he erased her from his life. For good. A father's promise. The next morning, Derek sat his kids down in the living room. Sophia, Jake, and Lily looked up at him, their innocent faces filled with confusion. "Is Mommy okay?" Sophia asked softly. Derek swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yeah, honey. She's okay." Jake frowned. "Then why aren't we going home?" Derek exhaled. "Because things are going to be different now." Lily blinked. "Different how?" Derek hesitated, then chose his words carefully. "Mommy and I won't be living together anymore." The kids froze. Sophia's lip trembled. Are you getting divorced? Derek nodded slowly. Yeah, sweetheart. We are. Lily sniffled. Did we do something wrong? Derek's heart broke. He pulled them into a tight hug. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. Jake looked up at him. Will we still see Mom? Derek forced a smile. Yes. She loves you very much. And that was the truth. Emily might have been a terrible wife, but she was still their mother. And no matter what happened between them, Derek would never take that away from her. Because unlike her, Derek still knew what love meant. The road ahead. Over the next few weeks, Derek focused on one thing. Rebuilding his life. He found a new place. A new job. A new routine that didn't include Emily's lies and betrayal. And slowly, bit by bit, he started to heal. One morning, as he was making breakfast, Sophia walked into the kitchen. She hesitated, then said, Dad? Derek turned. Yeah, sweetheart? She bit her lip. Are you happy? Derek blinked. Happy. It had been so long since he had even thought about that word. But then, as he looked at his daughter, at his home, at the life he was creating for himself, he realized something. For the first time in years. He wasn't just surviving. He was living. Derek smiled. Yeah, kiddo. I really am. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. Derek stood at the edge of the backyard, a warm cup of coffee in his hands as he watched the morning sun rise over the trees. The air was crisp, carrying the distant sounds of birds and rustling leaves. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. No more lies. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. No more questioning his worth in a marriage built on deception. He was finally free. And as he watched Sophia, Jake, and Lily playing in the yard, he realized something even more important. This was the life he was meant to have. Not the one where he was constantly sacrificing himself for someone who never appreciated him. Not the one where he felt like he was never enough. This was his fresh start, and he was going to make sure it was everything his family deserved. The final goodbye. A few days later, Derek met Emily for the last time. Not for himself, but for the kids. They had arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, just the two of them, to discuss the terms of their new reality. Emily looked exhausted when she walked in. Her eyes were puffy, her expression hesitant. Derek? He felt nothing, because he had already moved on. Emily sat down across from him, stirring her coffee nervously. I guess this is it, she murmured. Derek nodded. Yeah, it is. Emily sighed. I know you hate me. Derek took a sip of his coffee before replying. I don't hate you, Emily. Her head snapped up in surprise. I don't love you either, he continued. I don't feel anything toward you anymore. And honestly, that's worse than hate. Isn't it? Emily swallowed hard, because she knew he was right. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was just done. A civil agreement. They spent the next hour discussing the kids, their schedules, their needs, how they would co-parent. Derek was firm. He would never keep them from their mother, because no matter what Emily had done to him, she was still their mom, and they deserved to have both parents in their lives. But as for Derek, this would be the last time he ever sat across from her like this. The last time he let her take up space in his mind. Because from this moment forward, Emily Carter was nothing more than a co-parent. A name on a piece of legal paperwork. A chapter he had finally closed. The first night in his new home. A week later, Derek moved into his own place. A cozy, 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't big. But it was his. And when he tucked his kids into bed that first night, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Jake yawned as Derek pulled the covers over him. Are we gonna be okay, Dad? Derek smiled, brushing a hand through his son's hair. Yeah, buddy. We're gonna be more than okay. And he meant it. Because for the first time in years, Derek wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. A lesson learned. The next morning, Derek stood in his kitchen, flipping pancakes as the kids sat at the table, chattering about school. For so long, he had let Emily's betrayal define him. He had let her lies make him feel like he wasn't enough, like he had failed as a husband. But the truth was, he had never been the problem. She had. And now he finally saw that. "Dad," Sophia called from the table. Derek turned, smiling. "Yeah, kiddo?" She hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" Derek blinked. Happy. It had been so long since he had even thought about that word. But as he looked around, at his kids, his home, his new life, the answer was clear. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, smiling softly. "I really am. A future without regret." Derek spent the next few months rebuilding himself. He focused on his kids, on his work, on rediscovering who he was outside of his failed marriage. And for the first time in years, he felt light, like he wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes anymore, like he had finally let go. And that was freedom. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, his phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, someone he hadn't seen in years, someone who had once meant something to him, before Emily ever entered the picture. "Sarah. Hey Derek. It's been a while. Wanna grab a coffee sometime?" Derek stared at the message for a moment. Then he smiled, because for the first time in a long time, his future wasn't about what he had lost. It was about everything he still had to gain, and he couldn't wait to see where it led. A story of strength. Derek Carter had been betrayed, but he wasn't broken. He had been lied to, but he wasn't a fool. Because in the end, he didn't just survive. He won. Not by seeking revenge. Not by trying to hurt the woman who had hurt him, but by choosing himself. By walking away from the past and stepping into a future he truly deserved. The end.